guys? Drew Brantley here. Welcome to another edition of Inside the Exit. I'm joined today by Bob Frisch.
Hello, Drew.
Welcome to the show again. So today, guys, we're going to talk about a topic of, is your company a good company to own, or is it a lifestyle business, or is it a company to sell? Now, I want to get into this in the very beginning and highlight that we're not looking at, is your company a good or a bad company? So I want to take that off the table. We're not looking at good or bad. There's a lot of reasons that you might run your company in the ways that you might run it. And it might be right for you, it might be right for the company, but that might influence its ability to be sold. And so we want to differentiate this a little bit, because we run across this a lot. We have people that call up and they want to buy a company, and we begin to learn about the company, and sometimes we go, man, that's a great lifestyle business, but it's not a company that people are going to want to invest in. Other times, it's the opposite. We say, wow, this is an incredibly run company. It's great. This is definitely something people are going to be interested in buying. So as you think about your company, let's differentiate between the two. So kind of lifestyle company or a good company to own versus a company that investors are looking to invest in, or companies that people want to buy. And we'll talk just a little bit about the different types of potential buyers. So good companies to own. You know, sometimes you have a business and it's a great lifestyle business. Great cash flow. It's a nice annuity for you maybe. Maybe you're involved in it. Maybe you're not. You know, but for whatever reason, you run it in ways that are very efficient for you, and it makes sense for you personally or your family or the other partners that are involved in it. But at the end of the day, if you were to go to sell that company, there would be nothing left. You know, for example, I've got a company that we started about 12 years ago, and it's a great company, and I own it with a handful of folks. But look, if we went to go sell that company and we all walked away, there would be nothing left. And so if that's the case, that would fall into the category of like, look, it's a great lifestyle company for us. We enjoy the money that it makes. We enjoy using it for a lot of reasons and taking advantage of the company and the corporation. But at the same time, it's not a company that's set up or designed or that we're running to sell. So as you look at your company, you know, you might want to start asking yourself, do I think this is something that I've set up in a way that that somebody would be interested in buying this? And some of those questions that you can ask yourself is, you know, one, if I were to walk away, or if the partners, the owners were to walk away today, what would that mean? Now, some of you might be interested in selling, but you're not interested in leaving. So that question might be less relevant, okay? But if you are thinking about walking away, you really have to think about that. If I walk away, what's left of this business? The other thing is, what are the dynamics of how I generate revenue? Who are my customers? You know, do I have a lot of concentration? You know, I've got another company that currently eventually we would like to, we're preparing it, I would say, to be able to sell. We don't have to sell it, but we're preparing it to be able to. But right now it's not there. For example, that company right now has 3 main customers. So if one of those customers goes away, for example, the biggest one, we're going to lose over 50% of our business. So that's a lot of risk for a potential buyer to take on. So things like customer concentration, how you generate revenue, things like that. Those are things, and there's a lot of different questions, and we'll go into some of those in other videos. But you know, looking at, is my company set up to where somebody would go, look, I've de-risked as much of the risk in this business as possible. We acknowledge that there's always risk in any business, but if I de-risked it enough to where a potential buyer would look at it and say, you know what, I'm interested in buying this. So it might or it might not be, but as you think about it, just, you know, be aware that you might fall into the category of a good lifestyle business or good business to own, but not one to sell specifically.
Yeah, that business, great business to own, but might not be a good business for the market to acquire or invest in, is something we see all the time. And we get calls all the time. Does that mean you can't take a business that you own personally and you're doing well with and make it into a company that people might want to buy? Yes, you can. But one of the things happens, and Drew's example is a good idea, if they walk away and there's nothing there. So it's totally dependent on those people that are the current owners, be it 1 or 2 or 3, and they all want to exit. Well, the company is them. Think of it that way.
Yeah.
If the company is the people that are going to walk away, well, you know, that's it. So we see that, and we see that Another question you may have, well, I've got somebody that could run it if I did walk away. Well, one of the things you need to look at very closely is how good is that person? They're gonna check that out. If you have a manager running it day to day and you're sort of, how good is that person? Not that they can't replace that person, but that's a cost to them. If that person's not very good and can't step into your shoes, then there's going to be a cost for the buyer to come in, and that's a whole nother thing to think about as you're selling your company.
So, and you bring up a really good point, Bob, because Bob mentioned the idea of, just because you might be in that first category now doesn't mean you can't be in a great company to sell later. And so that just takes time to transition. You need to be aware, which also goes into kind of preparing your company to sell. You should check out some of our other videos around that topic, because there's great examples. Like, we've got a client that has been working for over 2 years preparing his company to sell, and it's been a great process. Might or might not sell it, who knows? But at least going through that process and preparing it's gotten to where he has options at that point. So let's kind of move to the other side of good company to sell, or good company for investors to invest in. So this category, there's kind of a couple different types depending on who the buyers might be. But in general, if a good company to buy is a company that's a stable company, has an offer that's unique, it makes money, defensible, a lot of things that go into that. But it's a company that somebody goes, yeah, it's been de-risked. It's enough to where I feel like I can acquire this and either incorporate it into my existing business, or I can use it as a standalone business and grow it and continue to make money. So let's look at both of those. So one of them might be a strategic, meaning a competitor or somebody that's in your industry that's going to acquire your company and roll you into their existing operation. So this is a type of company where you could actually be kind of in between the two. So I know we were just saying, like, your company might not be ready to sell, or good lifestyle business. This could actually be an example of where your company's a good business, but if you walk away, it's okay because they've got the infrastructure in place to support it. And so there is kind of a middle ground, but I want to highlight that that type of company has to be to a specific type of buyer, and that generally is called a strategic or a competitor, somebody like that that's in the industry and already has an infrastructure in place.
Sure, they're looking for your customers, they're looking for all sorts of things, your products or things of that nature. They don't care that the company was dependent on you. They're just looking at these other things that they can fit, as you said, into their infrastructure and put all that in and make money and take it that much further than you have.
Absolutely. A lot of buyers in the market, though, are not strategics, and they're looking at companies on a standalone basis, meaning when they look at your company, they want to review how you operate and the financials and how you make money, everything about your company, and say, can I operate this as a standalone business by itself, and can it continue to be successful post-close? Now, it doesn't mean they might not want to tuck in other entities underneath yours or other companies under yours. Doesn't mean they might not want to grow it. But what they want to look at is, does the company itself as it stands have enough to where I could buy this and say, look, I can get value out of this. I can make money off of this company, continue to make off of it in the future. So again, a lot of things that go into that. All of these categories, none of them are black and white. So I want to be very clear about that. But it is good to think about as you're looking at your company, how you're set up, how you run it. Am I running it in a way that's going to make it attractive for a potential buyer? Or am I running it in a way that works well for me or my other partners, but it might not be the best setup to potentially sell it in the future?
Yeah, and as Drew pointed out, it doesn't mean that if the company is dependent on you, or that you have customers and maybe you have a big concentration in one customer, that nobody's interested in buying your company.
Absolutely.
It's going to be, as he pointed out, a strategic, and then more and more we find that a lot of buyers are forming what's known as platforms, and they're gobbling up little companies that they're going to feed into the platform if you have it. And those are called roll-ups. Term's not important, but your company may be part of a roll-up where, yeah, They don't, you fine. You can exit. We have regional managers. We have managers we can put in place for your company in that region, for instance. Maybe you're operating in a certain little region they want to be part of, and they're still operating in other regions, but now you have a region. So there are all sorts of things, as Drew pointed out. Doesn't mean one thing or another. It just means that certain companies are better fits in certain areas. Certain companies are more lifestyle businesses, but those too can be sold. But those are going to be sold in a different way to a different group than necessarily something that can stand on its own, has a full management team, booking it, making a lot of cash flow, and there in turn have a whole other set of buyers that are interested because those guys will buy it and it'll continue running as is as opposed to tucking in.
So let's dig into this for just a second. So let's talk about standalone versus a tuck-in. So again, a tuck-in, infrastructure might or might not be important. A lot of times though, if you're thinking about is your company potentially a tuck-in for a competitor, the things to think about is your market one where if you were to be acquired, it would be strategic to a potential competitor? Would they gain value from adding your company, your customers, maybe your geographical footprint, whatever it is, to their existing company to continue to grow it? Or is it something where, in a market, for example, where you compete against another competitor, but if they were to acquire you, they actually wouldn't get any gain other than maybe just owning more of the market share. So there's value in that. But at the same time, just looking at it from the perspective of if you want to be a tuck-in, who potentially would be the acquirer and what would they get from me in that acquisition? Now, on a standalone basis, if you're thinking about your company kind of on a standalone basis, and that's the way you want to position it to the market, some of the things that you want to think about have been mentioned in some of our other videos, but I want to mention a few of them now, and maybe Bob, you can add to the list. But one thing is look at the management team. Who's running the business? One of the things we hear people talk about a lot is bench strength, or kind of who has or owns the relationships in the business today. And so if you want to be a platform, think about transitioning so that those relationships are not in your hands or your business partner's hands that are going to step out. You want them in the people that are running the company today. So what does that look like? And then also, do you have some bench strength going down to where not only do you have the current management team, but you have kind of that second tier that's being groomed maybe and in place so that you have kind of those next people to promote up from within. Doesn't mean you can't hire from outside, but looking at the management team is going to be a really important element that buyers are going to look at if they're looking at it on a standalone basis.
Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting, strategic or a roll-up where you're doing tuck-ins and things like that, where they have the management or things of that, and they're going to be able to use your company for gain of customers or whatever, or a region or something like that. But on the bigger companies, on the ones that are standalone companies, the investors and a tremendous universe of buyers, what do they have? They have money. And you as a seller, what are you interested in? You're interested in their money. And maybe you stay for a second bite of the apple and own a little bit of equity, and that's a whole nother video we're going to make, or whether you exit completely and go down to Florida and sail and play golf and fish and do whatever you do. Whichever way you go with that. But if you're going to exit completely and you're going to get out completely, they're looking at that bench strength, and that's so important to them. Why? Because here's what they have: money. They have the capital, but they're dependent now as a standalone on your management team if you're going to exit. So that management team is very, very important. So you don't want to lose those guys if you decide to sell the sale process. We've heard of managers that are offered some piece of the equity or a bonus, to go through this process. It is a process, but it is something that you really have to look at your company, especially in that area, as to the management depth and who you have running your company.
Absolutely. Next thing you need to think about are your customers and your revenue, and specifically customer concentration, meaning how much of your revenue is generated by specific customers. So if you're a tuck-in, it doesn't matter as much because a lot of times they're acquiring you for that customer base, for what you do, for your geography, whatever. Less relevant as a tuck-in. As a standalone, though, if you've got 50 or 70% of your business or 100% that's generated by one or two potential customers, if one of them goes away overnight, that's a lot of risk to a potential buyer. So if you do have a lot of customer concentration, you're going to need to be able to justify that and prepare that, because the concern from buyers is going to be, look, if we buy it, but if you as the seller, Mr. Owner currently today, own that relationship and you leave, who's to say the customer doesn't leave? So the more you can do to kind of help the potential buyers get comfortable with any concentration your company might have, the better. So as a platform, a lot of times what they're looking for is how to have as little concentration as possible. Now, again, as Bob has done a great job of highlighting and other stuff, none of this stuff is black and white and doesn't mean you can or can't sell your company. But in general, a lot of times as a standalone, buyers don't like to see concentration over 20, 25% of the revenue with one specific customer.
Yeah, that's so true. There are mitigating factors. You may have had that customer for 10 years, and therefore, the odds are lower that they would walk away. But there's still that risk. If they walk away and somebody loses 50% or 30, 40% of their customers, that's a huge hit. And so investors look at that. Can you box that in? Yeah. And when you deal with investment bankers and when you deal with the people that are helping you sell your company, that's something they're looking at very closely. How to mitigate the risk of losing that potential high concentrated customer.
So maybe you got a multi-year contract with them. Maybe it's a 10-year contract, so they're locked in. Doesn't matter, but just think about that and just be aware of that. Mm-hmm. So, those are those are two of the big categories that people are going to look at is, from a risk perspective as a standalone, is there a management team to run the company? And then is the revenue base and the customer base solid enough and likely to stay in place to where if we acquire it as a standalone company, it can continue to perform and operate and continue to grow?
Exactly. There are other ones that have to be looked at. This is just an example of two of the big majors.
Yeah. So again, kind of to summarize and encapsulate this whole video, I know we kind of rambled here and bounced from topic to topic, but what we're trying to cover is to distinguish between a good company to own or a good lifestyle business for an individual or a group of business partners, or a company that investors or strategics might want to buy, whether it's as a tuck-in or whether it's on a standalone basis. And so just beware, your company might fall into one of two buckets, or it might kind of straddle the two. And look, if you want to move more in one direction or the other, it's totally up to you. Whether it's us or somebody else out there, a lot of advisors can kind of help point you in the direction of what you need to do to prepare your company if you want to sell or exit, and kind of what type of buyers might be the right buyers for you to think about.
Yeah, the important thing to think about is they're buyers for just about everything.
Yes.
Just about every single
Absolutely.
company out there. But how you frame your company and how you structure it and where you go to find those buyers and which buyers would be more interested than other buyers or pay you more. How about that one? Pay you more for your company. That's where the rubber hits the road.
Absolutely. So guys, as with a lot of our videos, I'm sure you've got other questions. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to be a resource. Feel free to reach out to us, whether it's via email or phone. Check out the show notes. Please hit subscribe. Check out our other videos. And thank you for watching this edition of Inside the Exit.
Thank you.